Hey everyone, hope all is well. My name is Myles Dyer and welcome to The Quest for Global Empathy, a new podcast show I am so happy to get started as someone who has had many long conversations with various people over the years, usually at a bar, and these conversations tend to be about the world we live in and what we can do to make it a better place. And I often leave these conversations thinking, I wish I'd recorded that and made a podcast. And for the last 8 years, I've really wanted to get one off the ground, but have been waiting for the right opportunity. And thanks to YouTube's new initiative, Creators for Change, of which they made me a UK ambassador, I've been able to get some funding to create a studio, get the setup to make an awesome looking and sounding podcast, which I hope you agree on. And I'm making 4 episodes. And if it is something that you like the look or sound of, depending on what platform you're consuming this on, then I hope you will check out my personal Patreon page, patreon.com/Myles Dyer, because it's here you can become a subscriber. I want this to become grassroots funded. You can support it for as little as $1 a month. And if I hit the target that I've put on the page, then after the initial 4 episodes, I'll be able to keep making them. So yeah. Bit of a leap of faith, but I really believe in this, and hopefully by checking out these episodes you enjoy them as much as I do making them. Today I'm really excited to have 2 very special guests in the studio. They are 2 youth mentors I've been touring around the UK with for a project called Be Internet Citizens. It is a project that was set up in partnership between Google, YouTube's Creators for Change initiative, and the counter-extremism organisation, the Institute of Strategic Dialogue. And the aim is to go into schools and talk to young people directly about what it is to be a digital citizen, learning about things like fake news, the us and versus them mentality, and what emotional manipulation is. Things like this, things that I wish I'd learned at school, but then I realised when I was at school, the internet wasn't such a big thing. I had just on my phone Snake and texting, and actually when I explained that to some young people at the schools, they were like, "What's Snake?" which made me feel very old. So without further ado, I just want to get straight into the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in. So I give you Efe Ezekiel and Alain Fusion Clapham. Thanks for coming, guys. How you doing?
Great, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yay.
Important that we always just start this like really casual.
Always.
Like no formalities, just get into conversation. It's been quite a few weeks now since we last went to a school. We went to Bradford.
Our last one.
Yeah.
For the school term.
For Be Internet Citizens. How would you describe Be Internet Citizens for people that have never heard of it before?
Okay, well, it's a melody of lots of moments and tools and strategies for our young people to activate their social voice and social action, be a positive force online, and also provide them with the information and knowledge and guidance in order to navigate their way in their safe way, their safe path online, and make sure that they're doing it to also inspire others to also be a positive force online. So that's one side of it. Definitely. I'm sure you've got lots more to add to that.
Yeah, I would say it's the kind of the adhesive that's helping to glue society together right now. You know, we're going through this transition. A lot of young people, you know, if I go on holiday, I'm looking around, I see 3-year-olds swiping on iPads. I'm like at 3, like I had no concept of anything digital of that nature. So they're so advanced, young people, in terms of digital technology, but some things are timeless. Just connection, making judgments about what you're seeing in life, being able to have critical thinking skills.
Yes.
So the project enables us as facilitators and as people in society to be able to engage young people in the things they love and help them develop the skills that they're going to need for the rest of their lives as well. So, you know, it's just an ongoing piece of work that's making some very tangible and positive change.
So this is it's been the second year this year that I got involved with. So last year it was more of a trial, wasn't it? And now it's the more...
You know what?
I mean, it's always work in progress.
You say trial, we say...
Yeah.
But last year was the first, like, this is the idea.
Yeah.
It was the first time going to schools, whereas this year...
Let's put it this way. It's a global concern.
Yeah.
How we engage young people, how they develop skills so they're not manipulated online, and how they can grow up trusting the society they're growing into. So with YouTube, they have chapters around the world. And each place, whether it's Germany or France, have their own version. That's called Creators for Change.
Yes.
And our chapter is the Internet Citizens, which became Be Internet Citizens. So when we started, it was really just how would you reimagine this program that exists around the world for the UK? And, you know, some great minds got together and we trialed the program. But what was great was it worked from day one. You know, I was there delivering the program in Manchester, and it was all incredible amounts of theory that we were learning. Myself and Efe were sitting at the table, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm the right guy for this job.
We were just
I actually don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what an echo bubble is, the filter what. I was like, that sounds like stuff for a car.
We have to share this with young people.
Yeah, for real.
My days.
So, you know, steep learning curve. And I remember feeling a little bit confident that I had the rough concept, but the ability to infuse people, inspire them and teach it, that was like, can we actually do this?
Right.
So day one, I remember being in Manchester and it was so fresh. All the materials were still wrapped up in that bubble wrap. And I was like, I've never actually seen the tools I'm using, you know, but what was great, so much thinking had gone into making this that we hit the ground running, and literally those instincts we have as facilitators, they kicked in. We're enjoying it. People are learning. They're loving it. So it was always, I think, from day one, a working project.
Yeah.
And it's just got better for the past 2 years.
And I think when it comes to education, especially with something like this, you're teaching young people who have lived and breathed this technology from birth pretty much now, whereas adults of today haven't. And it's kind of, how do you have authority in teaching and saying these are the skills you need to know when it's coming from people that haven't had their lived experience? And I found that in terms of just when working for media organizations who want to get involved in, you know, YouTube or Facebook and these digital spaces. And it's not that that, you know, the industries know nothing. They have the infrastructure, you know, when it comes to compliance or being professional or, you know, legalities. And there's a bit of a trade-off. And I'm just curious to know that when it comes to this project compared to other times you've been youth mentors, how did you find that? I mean, it goes to what you were just talking about now, but teaching young people who feel that, well, we know how it works, but actually when you start going into how do you know if a website has fake news, do you know what the URL is? They're actually like, oh, I didn't realize that before. And
okay, so I think the greatest thing that I think that we've learned, and me personally, is that you come in as a teacher facilitator, but the most important thing is making sure that the young people realise that they can teach you as well.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a reciprocal moment, and that's where you get the life, that's where you get all of types of education, and that's why you connect with the young people and they're so engaged because they realise, oh, you're coming to teach us, but we've got so much to share with you too. And that's where the magic happens, and that's why we can get the points across really clearly and with fun and with a certain type of something that you really can't put a name on it, and then you will all come out with something great, and they go home and they've learned something really good that they can share with their family and their friends and their peers, and you've learned more than you could even imagine. And so that's how you answer the question. So always be open to what the young people have to tell you, because they will tell you a lot.
Yeah,
you can share.
That's how education, I think, is evolving. It's not about, I use the word authority, but obviously I'm hesitant to use that because that isn't. Teaching is becoming more open, and I say how like inspiration is bi-directional, but education is as well. If you can learn from both ways, but it's how do you get that balance between allowing it to be a two-way conversation, but also saying that these are the goalposts of, you know, at the end of the day, they have to learn certain bits of knowledge. You can't be so open that it's like, well, we've learned a bit off each other, that'll do.
But it's a skill. It's a skill. It's not everybody has that as a teacher or facilitator. So it's something you've got to learn, and it's got to be, you know, not undercover, but it needs to be kind of, you know, so we don't realise that that's happening. So it just feels natural. So in the way I do it, that's the way.
Definitely. I think everything goes around in cycles, and we're beginning to realise once again, education is about exchange. It's constantly about exchange. I mean, we're living in a world where people become ill and they look for tablets, but half these tablets are taking natural ingredients and put them together, and they're trying to put some kind of like signature on that so they can sell that and say it's not a natural product.
Right.
So everything is already there. Like with young people, they're just like this massive possibility, and a good facilitator or teacher can help chisel away and create the form so the young person can be excellent in events management, or excellent in the digital world. But it's a collaborative process constantly. I mean, I did a festival over the weekend, and it's great because I go back to Wales literally every year working with a lot of young people there. And I've, over the years, taught one young person how to co-host with me. And what's great is he teaches me a bit of Welsh. So we have a little banter. I do a bit of Welsh hosting and we have a bit of laugh because I get all the words wrong. You can speak Welsh? Terribly.
You know what I'm going to ask you now.
Terribly. It's coming, isn't it?
Yeah.
You set yourself
let me get to the story.
Okay, sorry.
Let me get to the story. But it is about exchange.
Yeah.
And literally at the festival we just had, the daughter of the lady who runs the festival, she's 12, and she's grown up watching hosting, watching shows, watching events, watching youth projects. And she just was like, I want to host with you. And I was like, okay, here's what you need. And I started to teach her the basics. But she's got this confidence and this exuberance that is just infectious. And the funny part was when the last headline band went on, and these big lads who were clearly into some form of rock, and we found out they were into like thrash metal, that crazy voice that they do and stuff. And having a 12-year-old introduce the band onto the stage, the event manager was like, I don't think this is a good idea, Fusion. I said, trust. And someone looked at me and said, this is going to be a test of your teaching, isn't it? I said, it might be. And she went up there with her friend, and they did a brilliant job of introducing the band. They did that back and forth bit. They gave information where the band was from, and they segued it beautifully. And that's what I mean. It's just literally, they are so excitable, but they also can listen because you're tapping into, you're actually empowering them. So they're like, if you're going to empower me to go on this stage, I will listen to some of the rules and structures that you've got. So that's the role of education, really, constant exchange.
That's a really good way of putting it. So you guys, I'm going to just be honest, you guys are so infectious when you're teaching, like really enthusiastic and so high energy. Once upon a time, were you natural public speakers, or is it something you what was the learning process for you both growing up? Because I know when I started learning public speaking, I was terrible and it was a long process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'll start it off. I mean, I would just say simply wedding, best man.
Really? That was the first?
My main driver in life is passion. And like my mate was getting married and he said, you're the best man. I was like, okay, cool. That means I've got to give a speech.
Yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great legacy of terrible and incredible speeches, and I want to land on the right side. And what's hilarious was he just become Muslim, and his family were deeply Christian.
Okay.
So pretty much figured out halfway through the wedding that half the congregation were completely drunk. The other half was stone cold sober, and I was there somewhere in the middle. And I literally had a post-it notes worth of like notes I'd made about my mate, and I had one joke, and went into my joke and put the notes away, and I just talked, and it worked. And I just remember people come up to my mum going, is that your son? Oh, what a great speech. And I was like, it kind of isn't about the speech, but throughout the night, people kept on referencing the speech. So I was like, okay, well, not only had I done my friend justice, maybe I might have something that I can say when I'm given a microphone. So that gave me the confidence to go, yeah, okay, cool. I can use this whatever it is for good.
That's amazing, isn't it? That, you know, something personal as a wedding can be the start of what impacts your career. Like it can come from any moment in life.
Well, what I find is like every time I'm on the mic, it's personal.
That's true.
It's a full investment because you have such a responsibility being present and being passionate. I cannot host anything. I cannot talk about anything if my heart's not in it.
I agree with that.
I'm out for real.
That's usually a lot of people ask me, why do I not get nervous when I like speak to a lot of people? And it's not that I'm not nervous. I think it's quite a weird concept, nerves. I think at the beginning, it is just like the abyss of fear of like, I've got to stand up in front of those people. But now it's kind of like, it's a bit of a buzz, and it's because you care and you want to make sure you do a good job, and it turns into a buzz once you get underway. But the advice I've always given is, if you talk about something you're really passionate in, and not just like, I'm passionate about the subject and I'm going to talk about it. Like, no, what you're actually talking about is your passion. I feel that you do become fearless. And that's not just to say, you know, it's easy. Like it takes practice and things like that. But for me, I've always made sure that the things I talk about come from personal experience or things that I do care about, because we live in an age where people can detect authenticity, and people will know and it gets to the whole root of things that I know we'll talk about later about politics and, you know, is that politician authentic or are they just reading a script?
Sure.
And I think it is just because we live in a world, especially in media, where when you watch videos now, people are speaking directly to you. Once upon a time, people would just watch newsreaders who read the news in a certain way, but that was seen as normal. Whereas now you hear people telling the news that are just telling you. And it's like, and so now you're exposed to that way of storytelling. You can't sort of jump back again.
Sure.
And it makes it more difficult. What about you and your experience with public speaking?
So for me, I call it just people speaking. It's something that I always did from when I was small. So my mum used to say, and my nan, I used to sit there with adults and just be part of their conversation, even though I didn't know what they were talking about. I'd just have a conversation with them. My mum said she'd never just send me to the shop because she knows I wouldn't go there. She'd said she'd catch me loads of time holding on to old ladies' hands and walking up the road in a different direction, just because I've always loved to speak to people. So I don't think it's something that you know, one day I had an epiphany that I wanted to speak. I've always just been talking, even child gibberish.
Right.
So and so I kind of knew that was something that I would lead me into a career that, you know, I would love. Mostly because I'm invested in not just talking but listening to what people have to say. So it just seems like a natural path for me. You know, so yeah, it's as simple as that. And I didn't stop speaking. I'm Nigerian. We like to talk.
So how does it go from just liking to talk to becoming a youth mentor? Like, how did you enter that world?
So how did I enter youth mentoring? Because apart from, you know, wanting to have a platform to speak, I also have a great passion for young people. And I always wanted to be a teacher as well. But I knew that maths and English wasn't my forte. And so I started volunteering while I was in the media. And I used to go and work and spend my time, you know, free charity time with young people and just hearing what they had to do, what they wanted to be in the world and seeing if I could navigate their path. And so they just kind of came together and they called me their youth mentor. So I'm like, I quite like this. This sounds good. And if they like me and I love them, so, you know, I'm going to see where I can take this. And it's been Providence and, you know, a good match.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think in today's day and age, the title of what you become has to come to you instead of like going, this is what I want to be.
Yeah.
And it was one of the best bits of advice I ever got. I actually did on a YouTube video in an interview with an investigative journalist called Jeremy Scahill. And he did, it was about a documentary he did called Dirty Wars about the drone program from the United States. And one of the questions I asked him during the interview was, what is your advice to people that want to be a journalist? Because I always wanted to get into journalism. And to paraphrase it, he put it a lot more beautifully than I'm about to. But he said, don't wait for someone to come along and tell you that you're a journalist. Take yourself seriously in what you want to do and the rest will follow. Like he says, take a notebook with you or just go out and do your own reporting. And for me, that was not just profound because of the direction I then took and realising, actually, I have been a journalist. I just didn't think it because I was doing video as opposed to writing or written journalism. But I think that taps into every aspect of life. Traditionally, and especially in the education system, you grow up in a system which is, what is the job I want in life?
Right.
And that's what you chase, and you look at what are all the hoops to get there. But I think everything's sort of switching around now, which is we don't know what the world's going to be in 5 years' time. And, you know, you've got probably 5 years of doing the exams from GCSEs in the UK to A-levels to then university. And if you want to go into a medical field, that can be like 6 to 10 years, depending on what you do.
Jeez,
And so when you have that typical interview question of where do you see yourself in 10 years' time, I always just want to point the finger back and go, where do you think the world's going to be in a year's time? Like half a year, that the rate of change is so quick. And so I think we have no choice but to see where we shape in the world as opposed to, you know, looking for that title and sort of trying to build ourselves into it. But that's easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah.
What about you and becoming youth mentor is a fair description of, you do a lot of different things. I've just talked about titles and how they're not helpful.
I thought we were given our titles.
Yeah.
Just giving it up from you.
Yeah, that's true. That's
you
true.
bestow it upon us.
Yeah.
I have never called myself a youth mentor.
I know.
That's more my
Okay.
my
Yeah,
name.
I never have.
Yeah.
And even when I was called a teacher, a lot of the staff were like, "You're like an inspirational speaker."
Right.
Like, no, I
Motivational speaker,
engage.
right.
I don't know. I mean, I think you should inspire constantly. So I've always struggled with titles. I mean, I think Fusion is my catch-all name. It's great because it means I can borrow from any and everything, you know. But I think in life you detect your mission.
Sure.
You know, you just are, and then there's like 7 billion people, and you just don't know what they're going through, but you start to understand what you're going through and who you are and how you can help. And I think from an early age, probably like 7, I knew I wasn't allowed to stay over at friends' houses and stuff, you know, overnight. You know, sleepovers and stuff like that. My parents were like, well, I don't know what goes on in their house. I know what happens here.
Right.
So they can stay here, but you can't
Right.
go out and stay at their houses. So, you know, I would always have quite an imagination, and I just had this thing called the Star Wars Club, which I created at 7, which was literally a collective where I'd invite all my friends around, and my mum gave me permission to take over every single room, and I will put a game in each room. So it'd be like Connect 4. There was a pool table downstairs anyway, and there'll be like Scrabble or whatever else was good, and I ran a club. You know, and that was like my way of engaging my peers at age 7. And I asked my mum, said, how long did I run that for? She goes, 2 years. You know, so I've always been, I always like sharing. I think that's my thing, sharing what I have and making people feel welcome and valued. When I used to skateboard in my teens, little kids would see me skating through doing my tricks, and they'd be like, how do you do an ollie or a kickflip? And I'd stop and I'd stay until they got it. That was my thing.
Right.
You know, so I love sharing, I love teaching. I got into the music industry because I love hip hop. That's where I got the name Fusion. And the music industry lures in talent. It lures in people with such a gift to share, but it wears them down, I think, you know, just through the need to compete, the need to conform, the need to be something for the industry.
I was just about to say that applies in all industries
Yeah.
in
Sure.
some ways or another. You're right. Actually, you bring in the ideas
Yeah.
and the freshness,
Yeah.
and then you say, but this is
Yeah.
this is the way it runs.
Yeah,
And
I mean, no shots at anyone
No, of course.
who's like a plumber or someone who works as a carpenter. But I mean, essentially, you know, I'm talking about the arts,
Right,
In the
yeah,
sense,
yeah.
the arts specifically has a role to enlighten, inspire, and enrich people's lives. You know, and when people are robbed of that opportunity and they're just making very formulaic, structured products,
Right.
you know, I find that alarming. So I went into the industry very innocent, making the best music I could make, being a DJ, being a journalist. And I kept on reaching this peak moment where I either conformed to what was going on,
Yes.
or I maintained what I loved and took a risk. And each risk meant I had to leave what I was doing and start again and again and again. And the last time that happened, I had enough. I was like, I really can't stand this industry, and I still love the culture. So I went into teaching as a way to save myself, really, to preserve what I loved. And also to go to that new generation and say, hey, if we really work together, I can teach you how to get into this game, but I can also teach you how to hold on to your values, hold on to your worth. So I became an event manager, tutor, and I taught for like 8 years and really helped young people put on their shows and stuff. And,
That's awesome.
you know, I've watched them grow up, and their values I admire and respect. I love working with them, these young people, and they're now in their 20s. So I feel that was my role as a facilitator, to help young people preserve their passion and their love and their intuition.
Yes.
And I see too many young people surrender that because there's someone older who's telling them how it's supposed to work. They don't realize that person's making it work for them.
Yes.
And quite often they're exploiting the new talent.
I wanted to ask this just on the topic of the music industry, just because when doing an episode with my friend Rou Reynolds, we spoke about how a lot of the live scene is declining in terms of opportunity, you know, for young people in that. And I was just curious to hear your thoughts, because when you're working with young people and talking about how to set up events, that's a great way to sort of combat it, instead of waiting for the big venues to, you know, put shows on, and that it's actually getting young people to have autonomy over what they do. Was that ever something that you worked on with them?
I suppose, again, like detecting the mission, I had a syllabus.
Yeah.
I had targets.
Yeah.
But in that, there was a little bit of space.
Yeah.
And in that space, I just drew on what I knew.
Yeah.
I knew how the hip hop scene had started off being just the the most kind of rejected part of the music world. These are people who, in America in the 70s had nothing. They were just either doing spraying on walls, spinning on linos, spitting lyrics, or using turntables as their instrument. And they made $1 billion industry in a global culture. So our equivalent was grime.
Yeah.
I was just stepping out of hip hop as the grime thing was emerging. And there's a thing called the 696 form, which meant that a lot of the grime artists who wanted to perform at shows were not allowed because the police would check on, whatever activities they've been through in their lives. If there was any blemishes or any threat, potentially, they would ban those artists from venues. They couldn't eat. They couldn't perform live. And because we were doing youth shows, we were their way in, because it was seen as a way of giving back. It's seen as a positive thing. And through that, we had artists like Getz. We had artists like Gigs. A lot of them were headlining our shows.
Wow.
People like Devlin. And my young people were booking them, organising the venues, running order, marketing, and also performing. So it wasn't like they were working for a headliner. They were also developing their own careers, but they were endorsed by that talent. So I suppose that was a model we developed. I think we made history. There's a guy called Bashi. He had a song called Black Boys. And it was probably one of the first times people in the UK believed in their own homegrown urban scene. Wow. We weren't waiting for Ludacris to come over or Ja Rule. It was like, actually, no, we have the talent. And we literally sold out the venue. And people were like, this is the start of something new. So I was grateful to be part of that. But it's part of a big, big cycle of youth and cultural excellence, which then gets co-opted by corporations. Because you can go back to the 80s when you had like raves in fields. Someone would just literally spread the word. There'd be a phone booth. Someone would go to that phone booth, get the details of which field it was in, and people would throw these mad raves. The only difference now is there's a corporation throwing the rave in the field.
Yes.
So just getting people to get their head around it, that the people have power, and we give that power away.
Talking about cycles, what's usually interesting with what you say about how corporations do eventually get involved is the cycle tends to be you get some kind of grassroots effort to do, whether it's a music style or an event or anything.
Yep.
And it will be criticised by the mainstream because they don't understand it. And I remember like when dubstep first came out and it was just seen as this, what the hell is this? And now it's used in most commercials. And it's like there's this sort of tipping point of like, actually, no, there's money to be made here.
Yes.
And that kind of attitude of the only thing that made them switch was there's money to be made here, I think really goes against what arts is about. It's nothing to do with the integrity of the music. It's just about what's going to help us with dealing with the market right now. Mm-hmm. And so from the other end, I find it depressing, but kind of just indicative of the system that we live in today. So yeah, I think empowering young people that way, and actually a lot of those sort of skills and sort of the way that you engage with them and teach them those skills does go into what the Internet Citizen's about. It's about you can actually start your own, YouTube channel, or you can use the internet to become a thought leader in a particular way. And so we will go into actually what the exercises are because they're really interesting. And actually what you were saying at the beginning about not knowing what a filter bubble is or an echo chamber, even I had to sort of check myself because I always knew what an echo chamber was. And for anyone listening or watching who doesn't know, echo chamber being that you talk within your own groups and that you tend to only hear stuff that conforms with what you already believe. But that predates the internet because if you went to the pub, you'd speak with people that thought the same or in your neighborhood, or you trade music with people that were into the same thing. Yeah. But a filter bubble, I was aware of in terms of what it is technologically, in terms of targeted ads, but I never knew it in the terminology. And sort of the filter bubble is the fact that, when you like content and engage with it online, you get served more of it. And so it keeps reinforcing that one particular thing. So if you don't like seeing negative news and you keep liking and engaging with videos that make you feel happy, you'll be given more happy and less, negativity, which is actually healthy in a democracy so that you know what issues need dealing with. But that's, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, what was interesting, because the program, as you learn and you teach, you delve deeper, you become interested. And just the very idea that your computer or your setup has already determined who you are before you've asked the question.
Yes.
You know, that's alarming. Like, you might think, oh, fresh thought, type in the question, but it's already saying, well, your history of searches suggests you hold this opinion, so I'm going to give you only this information. And the idea that if you type in the word, oil, and it makes an assumption that you're against the exploitation of oil, and it's talking about, strikes and issues around oil and its exploitation of the environment. Or if you're making a lot of money and you're big in business, you type in oil, it gives you the share prices.
Yes.
And not being aware of that is what is so frightening. People just make an assumption that everyone's having the same experience. And
it's the misconception by policymakers, and when I was much more involved in sort of privacy activism and trying to help educate and bring it to the attention of our policymakers, they believe, maybe not so much anymore, but at first they think the internet is just a platform in which we communicate with each other. But it's actually the way you communicate with yourself and discover who you are. When you have a comment or you're searching something, as you say, that could, not in terms of just what the search results give you, but that can also dictate this profile you can paint about someone. So if someone searches about, let's say, an act of terrorism, it's a question of, were they doing it out of interest, or you can make all sorts of assumptions. And I'll never forget a story. It was after the Boston bombing in the States, and there was a case where there was a family in a house where on two separate computers, I can't remember which way it was, you had like a kid that was searching for something online and a mother who was searching for something else. And as we know, in the Boston bombing, I think it was a pressure cooker they used to cause the act of terror. And I think someone in the house was searching pressure cookers, shopping, and someone was looking up an article about the Boston bombing. It was something along those lines, and what had happened was they basically got a call from the authorities because they found this metadata and thought this is suspicious. And so that's an innocent act of, misconception based on what you assume this person is doing when actually it was two people. But then there's a more nefarious aspect to it of like, who has got all this data, and at the moment we trust it's just in the hands of algorithms, but that data is being collected, and people like Edward Snowden and these activists are saying we need to be careful because that information is out somewhere. So we need to be more aware of what our interaction with the internet does, which is obviously what we're teaching out with here. But just going back to like the filter bubbles and that, and the fact that I had to sort of remind myself about it, we've also been doing it in two parts. So one part we go into schools, and the other part we've also been talking to youth workers and that. And a lot of them are learning about this as well. What was one thing you both learned from doing this that you didn't know before? Like, was there anything that stood out and you were like, I never thought about it before?
Oh, everything.
Everything. To be honest, there's probably elements of everything.
I think one of the most important things I've learned about this program is that it really goes to the heart of people. First, with the young people, I think they discovered so much about themselves. I think when we did a workshop, we had young girls who were telling us about how it made them feel with regards to emotional manipulation and the way that they are now able to express themselves and present themselves in their view of their identity in the world. Especially there was one young Muslim girl who said that now she feels that she has the power and she counts. Her voice matters and her identity is powerful, and that's something that she will never hold or reserve, and she will now be able to express herself without feeling so, I don't know if the word is demoralised by what is currently displayed about her identity. So for me, that the heart of the work is how you bring out the heart of a young person, and even some of the older people as well. There was workshops where, we did one of the exercises, us versus them, which is a very serious exercise, but it just brought everybody together. And I've never laughed so hard over something that is so important. And it just felt like a community in the room. So, I've had an expose of so many experiences that are quite life-changing, not just for me, but for all the people connected, just from a workshop in a day about the internet and how you can use it to just be more aware and navigate your own personal safety and those of everybody else. And And I tell you, that's probably one of the greatest and most powerful things that you can ever have. So, yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Right?
And what about you, Fusion?
Again, I think what Effie's saying is completely, completely valid. I completely agree. It's amazing what you can achieve in a day. And it's important. Yeah, it's so important to set the bar in the right place. We're not here to transform people. We're here to give them the tools of transformation. And one of the key things is having a common language to discuss things we all feel. And I think what runs as a thread from the young people in the schools to the youth centres that we were in before, right through to the teachers and facilitators that we worked in train-the-trainer sessions, is we're all involved in this conversation, and we all have fears, we all have concerns, and having a common language and a space to discuss those things and focus on them just enables people to breathe and just feel that things are going to be okay. So whether it's a young person who's questioning their sexuality and realizing that these sessions are inviting them to have a voice, not just a special session on them, but it's a session on all quarters of society having a voice, and them being able to take the mic and speak up about who they are and know that this isn't a space where they can be judged.
Yeah.
That's huge. And especially because we're strangers to them. We've just come in for one day, but they trust us and the space that we've created, which is huge.
And I can attest that. I remember the first school we went to together, which I think was actually, no, Birmingham was a workshop, wasn't it? I'm trying to think the first school we went. Was it Cardiff? Was that the first?
Possibly.
I know, sorry.
You've got so many here. It's been 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, they were all,
Road, baby.
This is not the important detail. They were already going, just coming along last minute. But I remember the first school we went to, and as you say, you only have a day. And at the beginning, you go in there with so much energy, getting everyone, energized, myself included, and everyone who's standing behind you from the team. But I remember at the very end, you asked some of these young people to stand up and say, what did you learn? And it wasn't just, I'm just going to reel off a few things just so I can leave. And that they were like, no, I know this. I know what fake news is or how to detect it.
Absolutely.
I know this about the us versus them mentality. And I was truly blown away. And I know that if you are, a teacher, that the magic of teaching will always be there, but it will never hit you as hard as that first time. And for me, that first time was just the transformation in one day. And you're right, it is about creating that space, because you do go into some quite deep topics.
Oh, yeah.
And at first, they're like, not just, who are these randoms coming in, but like, what is this? What is this scheme?
Yeah,
like,
what is this?
Yeah. Be internet citizens.
Yeah.
And stuff.
I'm missing double PE. Like,
But I always remember there's a few details that I always remember very clearly, because I think they're so effective. And one of the first questions you ask them is, how many of you this morning had breakfast?
Sure.
And less than half probably put their hand up every time. And then you say, now, how many of you, the first thing you did when you got up was look at your phone? And it's over half or three quarters or whatever. And it's like, so more of you would rather check your phone in the morning than have breakfast.
Absolutely.
And like, although that's quite a funny fact, the more you think about it, the more profound it is of a point. Because it's not just young people. I think about the amount of times I don't have breakfast, and the first thing I do is look at my phone. And again, because this technology revolution is so recent, we're still learning about, or actually we still haven't seen the full outcomes of what this is going to, the generational effect on mental health and well-being, for example.
100%. I mean, there was a really funny, like, if you're a teacher, then like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and somebody had the hierarchy of needs, and underneath. Can
you give a quick overview of that for people that don't know it?
Sure. Okay. So like, there's a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid, in order to feel like you can participate and be present, you need to feel safe. You need to feel you have water, food, and all the conditions to exist. And as you go up the pyramid, you need a sense of belonging and a sense of being able to speak your truth and be who you are. And then as you move higher up the pyramid, you reach a point of enlightenment when you know and you're able to share your truth with other people and be your authentic self. And so you got this pyramid, and someone had just drawn the pyramid, and at the bottom they put Wi-Fi as like the base need.
Right.
And you just see that with young people. If there's no Wi-Fi, they're a bit panicky. They're like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, I need to go online."
You feel disconnected.
That's their oxygen, And we laugh, but If you starve a young person of access to the internet for a day, you'll see them wither. You know, a sense of missing out on certain things, a sense of I need to reconnect again. You know, so, you know, I think we're laying down the groundwork to deal with some forthcoming issues in society. And I know the youth workers that we meet are aware of changes. They can sense that they're with the young people all the time.
Yes.
But what's great about the program is we're traveling around the country. So the issues in Bradford are very different from the issues in Stevenage and another area. And what we find when we do Train the Trainer is a lot of them are like, you're YouTube and you've got all this great stuff, but you don't understand what's happening here. Here. We've got gang problems here, and does this program serve those needs? Or we've got other issues other than terrorism that's happening in our areas. And what's great about the program is it isn't specifically about that. It's about digital awareness and understanding how to bridge the gap. And more importantly, we're not prescribing to them how to do this. We're just saying, here's a toolkit. It's the best toolkit we've got. And you have ownership of that
and make it your own. You can make it your own.
And people, that's mind-blowing to them. Like, normally you have to pay for stuff. Or you make stuff and you get all Gollum like, it's mine. I won't share it with anyone unless they pay me. It's like, hang on, YouTube have a responsibility, because they operate in that space, to deliver excellence in this area. And they're giving it to you because it makes sense. If your young people are safe and if you feel empowered, you can actually genuinely make incremental steps of making the internet space a safer and better space.
It's such a good point as well about the fact that we're not just prescribing information, because I think I totally understand in this very polarized world where there's a lot of cynicism against any industry or any institution about, so what is Google and YouTube doing going into these schools and, you know, teaching kids this? But the important thing about this is it's actually teaching methods of operating. It's not saying this is fake news, as in like, so these things are fake. It's not about that. It's how do you detect fake news, or how do you detect whether something needs to be researched a bit more? It's actually giving people the tools. And I hate using this cliche, but I use it all the time because there's truth to it, which is it's not about teaching people anymore what to think, but how to think. And that is the challenge of our time, because traditionally in education systems, you have young people going to school in a world of finite information, and a teacher's role is to transcribe that information in a way that is consumable so that they can then go into the outside world and apply it. But we now live in a world where once they leave school, it's not, now I'm going to ride my bike in a field and not worry about being attacked with information left, right and centre. It's no, the moment I leave the school gate, I'm online, bombarded by mass information. And so the challenge of our generation, it's why things like this are great, is how do we allow young people to navigate a world of mass information, because you can't hide from it. And as you say about like the need for Wi-Fi, it's absolutely true, because if you move home now, the things that you need is, you know, gas, electricity, hot water, internet is on that list.
Absolutely.
Like, and in some ways I'd put internet above
hot water.
Because if I don't have internet, how am I going to get hot water sorted out? Oh, you can use a phone, can you? A landline. But like, you know, it sounds jokingly, but a lot of people these days don't use landlines anymore. And it is remarkable.
Well, it is remarkable. And I just think also the great thing is that this means that it's also intergenerational. And I do think there needs to be an internet citizens for adults and grown-ups as well, you know, not just for young people, but adults also need to find a way that they can navigate, because they also, you know, can suffer from the same problems of how to use it safely, how to do it with high moral compass, which I'm sorry, there are also a lot of adults who need a lot of work on that, and just how they can also build communities. And like you said, we need internet even just to sign up for water these days. A lot of adults don't know how to do that, especially the older and our elder statesmen and women. So I think it's an all-round learning from all of us, and hopefully we can make it something bigger for everyone to share. So I think that's probably one of my high agenda things as well. So
that's definitely an important one.
Just to add on to that, I mean, to keep it real, some adults are the worst at spreading fake news.
Right.
Because, you know, they're coming from that generation where any announcement with a picture and a headline would have come from a genuine source.
Yeah. So you get home 6 o'clock news, that's what I needed to know for today.
Right.
Yeah. It goes to the heart of the education. It used to be about just transfer of information, so you take it and you go off, whereas now it's about, is the information
Absolutely. So they're the ones, ironically, who are, saying to their children, they're sending them a picture of a news clip saying, watch out for that.
Or content,
or a bit of content. And it's normally their children like, Mum, please, really, think about it.
Yeah.
No, seriously, think about it.
Have you checked this, and this? Oh, sorry, dear.
Yeah. But I think that is changing because of the landscape in which we communicate between generations with social media. So the example I always give now is if you post an article on Facebook and someone says, by the way, this isn't true, check this out. Okay, some people might go away. I don't care. This is, you're just not agreeing with me and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of people, if it's amongst their peers, will go, oh, okay. And they might not overtly admit it, but deep down they might go, actually, I could have probably taken an extra second just to check. Yeah. And I've been through this, and this is not me putting myself on a pedestal going, it's never happened to me. I'm a critical thinker. I don't think there's any such thing. I think it's a spectrum that you can only get better at. But there have been times where I've posted something and people have said, Myles, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, next time I'll remember. And so next time you take a bit more time. And so something I've tried to promote over the years is everyone needs to become their own journalist, but most people would rebut that saying, but I don't have time because I have to work a job. And it's because we used to live in a time where you could come home from work and watch the 6 or 10 o'clock news, and that was your update for today. But unfortunately, we are being forced into taking responsibility, because if we don't, we're going to be at risk, because we're going to drown in mass information of varying qualities.
I think the program has increased my positive perspective on the situation, because how much do we trust other people to give us any and everything? We'll probably look back on that period of, the 8 o'clock news or whatever, formal delivery, and realize, actually, no, there was fake news happening then, but we just were unaware of that. There was, emotional manipulation happening massively, but we were just so trusting, we just went with it. Yeah. And this is a great opportunity for us to actually say, hang on a minute, how am I using my time here? Am I sitting watching endless box sets and scrolling to a bottomless feed on Instagram? Or am I taking a moment to work out who I am? And I'm not saying you have to do either or, but that same conversation where that young person laughs at their parents or grandparents for the weird news story about the banana injected with AIDS or something that was sent to them, that's an exchange. That's, as Efe said, it's an intergenerational exchange.
Yes.
A young person says to their parents, this is me educating you. But equally, if a young person goes online and gets bullied or has a horrible breakup or something happens that makes them feel sad, that connection enables them to express their emotions to their parents or grandparents. And that same 5 minutes for them saying it's going to be okay comes from having knowledge.
Yes.
And it's that if we're all staring at our screens, let's face it, there's some homes where people are watching TV, watching the football, someone else is online, someone else is on their phone. We're all losing, because we're losing that elasticity and that connection we have between each other. So I think this program is a way of us building that dialogue up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is also about learning the different ways of communicating these ideas, because there's lots of different ways of doing it. And the way you speak to older people compared to younger people, there is a difference.
Big time.
And a quick story.
The way they receive it as well is that there's difference as well.
Yes.
So we need to always remember that. The receiving of all this information.
Again, traditionally,
pivotal.
In traditional education systems, this is the way you learn it.
Yep.
Either you comply and you learn it, or you're a failure. Whereas now it's about, actually, there are different ways. Yeah. There's the whole analogy or diagram of a teacher in front of a load of animals saying that your exam is climbing the tree, and you've got like a monkey and an elephant and like that's how, and a fish, which is flopping on the floor, like no chance. And like an exaggerated version, but it's kind of, that is the education system of, if the best way you have of communicating ideas and your knowledge is verbally or in coursework where you have a bit more time to think about it, and you're like, but no, you're going to be up against everyone else. You have 2 hours to regurgitate everything you learned in the last 3 months. And even if you're good at that normally and you just had a bad day, that's a stamp on your life.
Breakfast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But that's it. But a story I wanted to quickly talk about was a friend of mine. No, we've got plenty of time to chat. It's all good. A friend of mine, Clara Westaway, is an amazing inventor I met at Thinking Digital in Manchester a few years ago. And she does a lot of inventing with technology and does very innovative, ways of doing it, and like our other half is a magician. So when you have an inventor and a magician, like I went to their office, and to get into their office, you have to go behind a bookshelf. Like it was like the most amazing place ever.
We're in Harry Potter land. I'm loving it.
It was so good. But one of the projects they showed at Thinking Digital was, I think it was with Samsung. It was with a big mobile company. And what they did was they were looking at a new innovative way of doing instruction manuals. And they said, whenever you talk about this, of course, this is generalizations. There are exceptions to the rules. But generally, they're saying older people are used to, when you get a new piece of kit, you have instructions, you read the instructions, and then you get to the bit of gear, and then you do it, you know how to set it up. Whereas young people today are very much, throw the instructions away, I'm just going to play around with it and work it out. And so they said, surely there is some kind of hybrid way of doing it. And so what they did was they created a book. It was a really thick book. And what you do is you open the first page, and it says, here is your phone. And embedded in the book is your phone. So you take the phone out, you then turn the page, and it goes, here is your SIM card. And so you take the SIM card out of the book and you turn the page. And as you're going page by page, it's actually telling you how to set up the phone. So although you're reading instructions, it's actually taking it. So there's that physical aspect to it. And I recommend checking the video of it, because it was just like such an interesting hybrid. Because again, when we think of, older people think one way and young people think another, it's like, so there are two ways of doing it. There's actually like a middle ground or a hybrid that you can do, because actually, young people might like to generally just, work it out for themselves, but instructions are important. Maybe for your phone, it's not that important, but if it's taking medication, there are things in life where instructions are important. And so having it that it's just not like a, black and white book with just really dense text that's in 10 different languages. So you're like, where's the English or French or whatever you need? And you're just blinded by it. There's a good middle ground.
Yeah, I love the IKEA instructions. There's always, just at the beginning, there's a page of just a kind of random face with a bubble saying, I'm confused, and a phone line. Because just sometimes you look at things, we're so used to things being pre-packed.
Right.
I think a lot of young people just like, great, I just open up and make it work. But someone has preempted that and set things up. I remember you had to go and buy batteries separately for things you bought. Things just come now with a battery already in it.
Yes.
So I think there has to be a middle way. But sometimes with YouTube, what I love is I bought a car and I honestly couldn't open the petrol flap. I just thought normally just open the flap like that. And I'm like sitting in the car running out of petrol. Don't have to open the flap. I don't know if I'm going to make it back home.
Was it a secret lever somewhere?
Yeah. But I had no concept of a secret lever at this particular point. I just knew I was running out of petrol. And I just literally went on YouTube or just Google and asked the question. And someone like me has gone through that problem, and they've kindly uploaded a quick 1-minute video with that and a few other bits. So it's interesting how the instructions are coming from the people.
So you didn't go through the massive, thick, user manual of the car, which you just throw in the glove compartment and never see again.
Yeah, I just bought it. So I was happy just to be on the road and get back. So yeah, it's so quick. I think a lot of companies overlook the fact that some of the questions we have, they'd never thought of. It's experience. Someone's had a problem and they say, this is such a common problem. I'm going to upload a video about it.
Yeah.
YouTube has saved a lot of people via their videos.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree. And also, I just want to add that, and just to go on to the generational thing as well. I know my mum is a techno wizard, right? She builds websites. She's always been into technology. That's her thing. So I just also want to remind them that I know that a lot of different people with different voices are able to instruct us traditional way or new ways, and they're coming from so many different places. You even give the story of what inspired you, that older guy who brought the radio up and put the music on. That literally is, a lot of the people that I come across. Even Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who created the www. He's a lot older than us, but he created the internet, so he knows it better than any of us. I met him, and he's a wonder mind, and the way that he instructed about how he created this amazing system that has changed our world is courageous, it's brave, and it's probably one of the best teachings I've ever had. Didn't understand some of it, but it was mind-blowing. So I just want people to really understand that instruction is everywhere. Learning is everything, and we need to make sure that our sources comes from everywhere. So big up to Sir Tim Berners-Lee and my mum.
So met Tim Berners-Lee. Where did you meet him?
I was asked to attend a foundation meeting for his documentary, which tells you about how he started the internet. It actually came from listening to his dad talk about psychology, and his mum was into computing and the sciences. So he already had a great foundation of learning and wanting to create something that connects the whole world in such a positive way.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, he's like one of my heroes, to be honest. And one that doesn't get the attention or the support that he needs to encourage, you know, most people don't even know who he is.
Yeah.
You know, the kids who use it don't know who this man is. And he is the one who created what we use every single day, and doesn't get he needs, you know, support for his foundation.
Yeah.
And you know, we need to get the word out there. So that's my little
Can't even imagine.
plug today.
I can't even imagine what it's like to have been the creator of the www.
I mean, it's really interesting because we're arriving at this point of, you know, this kind of us against them kind of world that we live in, where people want to be opposed to this group or this group's fighting this group. And when you talk about the internet, you know, Tim Berners-Lee was the unifier. You know, he was the one who said, right, you're sending me this document on this format, this person got in this format. Every time we meet up, we haven't read each other's documents because we haven't got a universal format. So that www was the unifying format. But the internet was invented for military purposes.
Yeah.
You know?
Like where it starts for most places.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to us versus them.
Yeah.
Like, so most technologies or things that are kind of championed from above are divisive by their very nature. It's us needing this technology because there's an other that's a threat to us. And I think that is coming to an end now, because there needs to be new voices, because that whole narrative is leading to this kind of doomsday mentality that we're kind of inching towards. When I learned about that 6 minutes to midnight kind of theory of this clock ticking towards
the
our devastation, the doomsday clock, you know, and it's only going to change if we actually start to rethink everything. And there's Frank Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and we always go for the intellectual voice, the voice we trust. But people have intelligence through movement, you know, intelligence through sound, and they're all equal intelligences. But we just lean towards the academic one, or, you know, that voice is the one we trust. And, you know, we need to start to be a lot more open-minded and appreciate there are other voices in the room.
And adding to that, that's why, you know, so many young people love YouTube, or just people love YouTube independently, because I have a different voice there. We don't all sound the same, we don't look the same. The platforms, that's why people who are so obscure have such powerful platforms, and this is making the mainstream, I think, not just the corporate world but the media world as well, the corporate media world, think, oh, actually, you know, they don't all have to sound and look visually alike. These people and they have the data for it now. So I think, even though it sometimes feels like a doomsday, there's something happening, and it's so powerful and it's so positive. And I think the world is changing in a very, I don't know what quite the word to put it in, but it feels like it is brighter and lighter, even though it may not look that way because of the information that we think is being sent. But I know that something great is happening. Yeah. And the voices that are coming out are there, because we never had that before. Never had that before.
Sure.
The visuals that I'm seeing now, never seen it before. You know, just as a woman of colour and a woman who has been brought up in the East End of London, socio-economics aren't, you know, working class, immigrant family. I never thought that I'd see women like me who were able to have a voice and who were important and making a way that I couldn't even imagine, you know. So they only told us that, you know, one, which is usually Oprah, is the one, you know, but not now. There's so many, and I just think that we need to take a moment to embrace the greatness that is evolving in this world, because there's so much more coming that we couldn't even imagine. So yeah, I'm
totally with you on that, and it is only by identifying the issues that you're able to then put things right. And the point that I mentioned even in the last episode is, I think the dichotomy we live in is that as we become more unified in our groups, the division that separates these unified groups gets bigger as well. There's a bigger line, and it's what we're seeing in the polarization of politics and things like that. And when we talk about the us versus them, you always need to be unified against something. And that's how these big groups are forming against each other. And so I think it's this weird dichotomy that I think the world is becoming more unified, but the groups are so big with differences between them that I think division feels quite large as well. But I think that the next stage is, can we now connect those last few divisions? Because once we do that and we realise that the other are things like global issues, like if it's, you know, catastrophic climate change or exploration in space or dealing with poverty or income inequality, you know, dealing with society, if these are the things that we can make, I hate to use the word, the enemy, then I think that that's the final hurdle. But unfortunately, as we're trying to deal with these issues, there's still a lot of inward fighting, which in an age where it's so easy to see all corners of the earth on video form, you know, people can film on their phones and that. I think it is a scary place because it's no longer just what you can see outside your window. You can see if it's an African American getting shot by a police officer in a town, a small town in the middle of nowhere, that's uploaded on Facebook and shared to millions of people. That feels real because you're literally watching it there. You're not watching the traditional media's. This is the story where they
even get the story.
They wouldn't even show. I remember. I actually do remember the tipping point of seeing when the news started showing that kind of footage, because they realised everyone's what. Even when like Occupy Wall Street was happening, very little reporting, but because all these live streams were getting so much viewership online, the media's like, we have to show it now. And that's not me getting conspiratorial. I think, you know, there's editorial things of like, what is the agenda for today? But I also think in terms of like violence and police brutality, you know, we don't really want to show someone being shot, but if everyone's seeing it online, there's now a journalistic imperative to actually, no, we have to show it as well, because otherwise it looks like we're not being transparent. And I think that's an interesting thing of how the freedom of the internet is actually making traditional institutions have to rethink, how do they compete? I mean, I even think about when I worked for 6 months at BBC Comedy Online, and we are just talking about comedy online, but we had to get like compliance for certain jokes.
Yeah, because comedy's a political foundation,
yeah, of course.
Isn't it?
But I had to phone someone. It was like a Cheryl Cole impression, and they said, "Oh, before we put it online, it needs to go through compliance." And I sort of phone up compliance, and whoever was working there at the BBC was going to say, "Well, how would you feel if you were Cheryl Cole? I'd be really, you know, annoyed by this." And I'm like, yeah, it's not my comedy sketch, but like someone's going to find it funny.
You leave
and she
Cheryl
was
Cole alone.
She was saying that. Right? She was saying that on the phone, like, how would you feel if you? And I'm like, I'm kind of with you, but that's not my role here. My role is it legally sound? And yeah, I just remember that. And it's like, why am I being attacked now? but on a serious note, although that was quite serious, you're competing against people who are doing comedy online where they don't have to answer to compliance and that. And right or wrong, that is the market that you're competing against.
Okay.
And so I think there is a risk in journalism of, you know, is it about getting the story first? Because, you know, people online are just going to post up whatever they hear first. It's not about just being first. It's about being accurate. And I think there's this really interesting battleground of like, what is the perceived competition of like, what is it to be the best news organization? Is it being first or is it being right? What is it with comedy? Is it just about being the most brave and ruthless, or is it about being the most responsible? But then that's a whole other discussion.
Those are big topics.
No, but these are the big topics that the internet is blowing up.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what was your intention? Why so many people surrender their sovereignty? I did this because I was working for him. I did this because of what she did to me. And then someone says, but what would you have done if you weren't working for him? What would you have done if she didn't do that to you? And most people's answer is, I don't know. And that's the most important question. What would you do? What are your values? When I was a journalist, I was asked for a very high profile publication to go and interview a huge artist. And what underpinned that interview was one or two questions, which I know the artist would have hated, and also I didn't care for as a fan of that artist. It was very seedy, sordid questions they want me to ask. And I really had to wrestle with so many different things. Yes, I appreciate this opportunity to be on working for like a highly recognized British publication. Yes, this artist is iconic. And if I don't ask these questions, I don't get the gig. So I did ask the questions, and I buried that question in amongst loads of really great questions, but I saw the hurt that it caused. I also then buried that answer in a 4-page article, and then the editor exercised his power to eventually move it up the article. And then when I refused to write it the way he wanted, he wrote the first paragraph of my feature. And that was the last feature I wrote for a big publication. I quit. And that pretty much ended the ascension of my career as a journalist. But I can look back on that and say I learned something. And as much as it hurt to write that story and have her upset by what I wrote or what I sanctioned, I learned a lesson which has stayed with me for the rest of my life. Mm. We've got to look at why we're here and what we do things for. You know, we're a finger pointing culture right now. He did that wrong. She did that wrong. And I'm just appreciating what compassion is about, because we do wrong every day. We're constantly accusing other people of it. We're doing wrong every day. I did a talk on toxic masculinity, and I just found it was impossible to criticize people without checking yourself first. And so many people, I call it the ricochet room, because every time someone fired a shot at somebody, you hit them back.
Right.
And the only thing you could do is just really look at yourself, look at your own values, and then work from that point, rather than listening with intention of attacking someone or blaming someone for something.
Yes.
And there's a guy called Sivan Bomar had this idea that compassion links the compass. And it's like, what direction do you want things to go in? And that's my interest. When I look at my life, I'm like, I try and pick projects that, as a compass, guide me towards a truth and something that I want people to feel connected and feel whole. And I'll pick any project that is that. If it's hip hop, great. If it's Internet Citizens, great. If it's doing my own project, BMT, Black Man Time, great. But I won't do Black Man Time and it's just about black men, even though it's called Black Man's Time. It's about finding universal truths. And one thing that made me feel like, okay, I really believe I can do this, was when black men traveled and black people traveled from Africa around the world, they were offering goods. They traveled with something. And that's what I think life's about. It's like travel, but offer something to trade. Give somebody something they want.
Yes.
So it's not about I'm black giving you something. It's no, I'm from somewhere you've never been with something you want. Let's exchange. And that to me is like, okay, that's quite liberating. It means I can include everyone in my events and my conversations. We do that naturally with Internet Citizens. Yeah. And I think as a teacher, Efe does that naturally anyways. Like whenever we jump on stage, whether it's 100 people at Google HQ or we're at a school where there is literally one black child in the audience, you know, we never ever leave there without taking on that role of connecting everyone together. Absolutely. Seriously.
Yeah. The whole thing about people finger pointing when it comes to values, the finger pointing society we live in is so true. And I think people talk about like virtue signaling, people on their high horse about this is what I believe is morally right. And I think the reason people use that term is because you're right, it's all done in finger pointing of people worry that if someone, says this is what the right way of living is, it's somehow them saying, and I'm a good person because I believe this. Yeah. And of course, there are some people like it. Sure. But like when I come forward and say, this is what I think is like ethically right and that, it's not with absolution. It's kind of, this is what I believe. Okay, an example. So, veganism.
I knew you were going to go there.
Right? I think it is the morally right thing to do.
Okay.
I'm not a vegan. And we can have a discussion if it is the morally, but my point is that I am a hypocrite in that sense. And so I don't go out preaching to people going, I think everyone should be a vegan, because I'm still trying to work that on my own way. Sure. And I think that with these things, it's about being intellectually honest. I eat vegan food quite a lot. I've definitely reduced the amount of meat I eat, and I think that is progress. But being on traveling the path of progress is not what people often think about when we talk about these issues. It's either you're with us, so the question is, are you vegan or not? And I think that's the wrong question. I think it's, do you eat vegan food or do you cut down? Because there's a lot of people, and I have some friends who are vegan who are very much, it's so easy, Myles, you should just do it. And it's kind of this thing of like, you just need to switch or else you're a part of the problem. When actually I think this conversation is more like,
This is exactly the issue.
Yeah.
I've got some people, they went vegan, so right, they've cut out this, cut out that, but they still want to go drinking.
Right.
And then they want a kebab. But now they go to the vegan kebab shop.
Right.
They're still eating at like 11, 12 o'clock at night. They're still drinking.
Right.
So if it's a question of veganism, health, or,
Okay, yeah.
It's a
or
lifestyle.
what?
Yeah.
Because what is a lifestyle even? Like, what is it you're trying to achieve?
Yes.
If you're trying to achieve health, you probably better off eating a little bit of meat and not eating after 8 o'clock and cutting back on your drinking. You'd probably be a healthy human being than somebody who's eating, because not even all the vegan like
Health,
foods
No.
are healthy.
No.
So like, which story is running in your head? The story that you're okay because someone told you you're vegan, or the story that your body's telling you what crap is this? It's not meat, but it's still crap.
Right.
You know,
It's a good point also. and that's the thing with each moral issue. There are many reasons why. So it might be health. Some people, it is just the ethical issue. For me, the ethical side of sentient beings that we're slaughtering, and people would argue, but we've always done it. I don't think that's necessarily a good defense. And I'm not going to get into the full debate about that now. But I totally.
But then you watch the nature programs, and then you just see one jaguar chasing after a gazelle.
Right.
What are we going to do? Like, lock up the jaguars? Like, hey, you.
No, I'm with you on that. So I know that like Richard Dawkins talks about it, about how, you know, he studies Darwinism. And so he goes, but that doesn't mean I believe Darwinism's the best way. I think we then learn from nature on how we can improve the situation. So I did a video many years ago called The Ethical Meat Eater, which sounds hilarious. But it was all about 3D printers. And we hear about lab-grown meat. And so for me, I think there is going to be a continuous vegan movement, growth of the vegan movement. But I think that the point at which everyone becomes vegan or doesn't eat slaughtered animals, I think is going to be beaten by the technological advancements. I think that there's just going to be a point where we can create more healthier, cheaper meat that is done in a lab or on a 3D printer. Now, that sounds alien now, and a lot of people go, but it's not natural. And we can get into a debate of not everything that's natural is good for you.
Right.
Sure.
But it's even with the same of debates like climate change or should we be on renewable energy? And some people go, I think climate change is a hoax in terms of being man-made. But for me, I say, well, let's take it from this perspective. You may not agree with fracking or all these issues, but sustainability is important. Like I hear a lot of people now that don't believe in climate change saying, but I think like pollution's clearly bad and we need to deal with it. And so there are different ways of getting to it. And I think so sometimes if you start with the ethical position, firstly, that's not how you get people on side, but also it's not the way people think. It's about the journey of getting there. And so for me, I always talk about with renewable energy of it's going to be the most sustainable way because we're going to be able to produce energy for a lot cheaper. We're going to have an infinite amount of energy because we'll be getting it from the sun. We're not going to be putting fumes into the atmosphere. And we're not going to be relying on an oil-based economy around the world, which we know perpetuates things like war and a lot of these big issues that we have. And so there are different ways of getting to it. But I think that the moment you say, this is the flag of my ethical position, I think that's where people get defensive because straight away it's like, this is the flag of my ethical position. Therefore, this makes me a good person. And if you're not standing by this flag, the assumption is no one else is a good person, which is not helpful. And in many ways isn't true. No. Because there are people that are doing really, really well in, let's say, the LGBT community and fighting for those rights, but they might still, you know, eat animals. And I'm not here to say what is right, but there are people with different moral compasses going, you're not an entirely good person because although you're good for this cause, you're not for this. And so for me, it's about unity. It's about helping each other up and realizing that we're all on a journey where we need to better ourselves in different ways. And the way we do that is by having these conversations.
And introducing empathy into everything that we do.
Absolutely.
So that's what we have to realise and put as our forefront and runner whenever we're hearing about how other people live and the decisions that they make. And also then having that word you use, compassion. But I think that most people don't even have compassion for themselves, let alone worrying about anybody else. So I think we need to amalgamate the two of them, and then, you know, and work on that. And of course, once you get a bit older, it's hard to do. But I think if we try and introduce it, and of course, if you introduce it to the young, and I'm not talking about teenage, I'm talking about the very young, the toddlers, the small ones, then that's how we really start seeing change. It may take a little while, but I do believe that, you know, one day someone will be able to stand by someone who is a vegan or a meat eater and have a conversation and break bread together, and it's going to be okay.
It would be,
yeah,
and it would be
fight,
and it would be bread,
and it would be bread. They'd break bread together and then eat what they wanted, but then it would, you know. Yeah. So you know, for me, that's the vision that I have. It may not. Most people probably just think, you know, I feel a bit John Lennon-y here,
no,
you know, but
do you think that's...
Which is the best way, because I think he had it right with, you know, the way he wanted to bring everybody together via music. But yeah.
But do you think that's part of the problem, is we live in a world where everyone's trying to find their identity, and you identify with groups of people and ways of thought. And so if we go back to the ethical flag, that is a part of identity. And if you're not in it, you don't identify with them, because and you were talking about intentions and how that's important.
Sure.
It's not just in terms of your own intentions. It's the assumption that people that don't think like you don't come from a place of good intention.
Right.
Because intentions are important, but that's not the whole picture. Like, you can have good intentions and still do something bad. And so when people are doing something they think is good, people will often think they've done something that I don't agree with, so they must come from a place of bad intention. And I think that comes back to the issue of compassion and empathy, and realizing that we've all come from a different journey.
Right.
People, you know, these abhorrent behaviors don't come out of a vacuum. Sure. There's a reason. Everyone is born as a complex slate. You know, they're born into a world and they're nurtured in a certain way that teaches them the words that they speak and the thoughts that they have. And I think a lot of us just look at someone sometimes and go, they're a bad person. And I don't think there is such thing. Like,
you don't think there's no such thing as a bad person?
Correct. Yeah. I think there are bad actions and bad behaviours and bad thoughts, and so some people will jump on me and go, "Oh, so murderers aren't bad people." Like, I don't mean to play with semantics, but actually, we live in a world where semantics is important. Of course, the actions they've done is bad, and they might be in our current society beyond redemption or rehabilitation. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. My point is, though, that if you go far enough back in their life, there will have been a route that led them to a certain way. An
experience or an incident.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that goes to the heart of a point I always try and make, and I made it on the last episode, I'll probably have to make it on every one.
You will.
Explanation is not the same as justification. And I think that is something we have to be intellectually honest about. Of, you can explain why things happen, and that's not me excusing behaviour or saying that, you know, we should just make a pass. Because often when you talk about issues of like, why did someone steal something from a shop? And someone will go, oh, so that makes it all right then. No, it doesn't make it all right. But if you just put it in a filing cabinet called bad, it's kind of like wiping your hands clean of it, saying society has no responsibility to learn why something like this happened. And you're not going to break the cycle, which is the key of education, is to break bad cycles and create good ones.
Oh, you know what? You can go to any prison, you know, up and down this land, and I've worked with young people who have ended up in prison. And of course, whatever led them there, they do all have a story where they've started from. And, you know, it's all about the, like you said, rehabilitation, and then realizing that, you know what, I agree with you. You just made some really seriously just, you know, I don't even like to, you know, just decisions that led you down the wrong path. And so, you know, I do half agree with you. Sometimes they're not bad people. They're just very, you know, bad decision makers. So,
and also, I'm sure we can agree that anyone who does harm to others is harming themselves. You know, if you fall over and you bruise, you know, like, that can heal. You know, you still have a scar, you still have a mark, you still have proof that something had happened. And I think we write people off. We say, right, you are now defined permanently as bad. And we also do the opposite. We write people, look at people like Jimmy Savile. Like, you know, people just said, he's so good that he's unassailable, unquestionably good, until people actually looked and said, actually, no, some of the stuff that he was doing, I was around, and they didn't question some of the trips to hospitals and different things he was doing because they just assumed good.
Right.
So this assumption that people are holistically one thing, well, none of us in a given day, we do something good, we do something bad. So why would we make an assumption that someone is inherently good or inherently bad?
You're right. Yeah, even on the good aspect, it's unhelpful.
It's just all the way unhelpful.
Yeah.
There's a great documentary we screened for the last BMT event called The Work. And the premise is beautiful. It's set in Folsom Prison in California. And the inmates in there, for whatever reason, again, we look at backstory, politics, whatever, for whatever crimes they've committed, they're doing 3 times life plus 55 years on top.
And how long's life?
He's not getting out.
He's not getting out.
I know.
I'm with Effie, like, the score on that. Daylight is foreign to him.
Right.
I wasn't working him. How old is he going to be when he gets out? Now, the reason I asked was because the life aspect is so bizarre to me.
Life here is different to life in America.
Isn't it 40 years here, life?
It depends.
Yeah,
that's right. I know that's not important. It was just a...
No,
it is important.
Yeah, it is important.
Yeah.
I would safely say some of these guys in the documentary will never, ever leave prison.
No.
Okay? But they've gone through their trauma, whatever they've been accused of, whatever crime they've committed, they're doing their time. But they've gone through a healing process where they've had group therapy, and they've come out the other side of group therapy with wisdom. And instead of just sitting there going, what's the point of me being here in prison with all this wisdom? They open up this prison twice a year to people on the outside to come in to have a group therapy session with convicts.
Right.
And these people come in, and what was so amazing watching the documentary was there was more compassion and more humanity and more wisdom and more love coming from these men who will never leave prison than these people who are living in the quote-unquote free world. So I'm a huge advocate of redemption and healing. And because that speaks of us. When we do things that we think are just beyond the pale, when we have a relationship breakup, we do something to someone and think, I've done something so bad to that person. We hurt ourselves. We damage ourselves by making that assumption that you can't heal, recover, and learn from it. And I think that's one of the most important things that unify people. What we judge outside, we judge within.
That is. And that goes to the heart of what empathy is about, which is you can't experience every possible outcome in life. So you have to look to other people and hear from their experiences and share it. And the biggest learnings come from people's mistakes.
And failures.
And failures.
And pain.
And pain,
Oh my gosh.
all those things. We've got a song coming, but...
And joy as well.
And joy, happiness.
Shout out for joy, man.
Joy
gets a bad rap. People say, I learned from my failures. I learned from lots of great things that have happened as well.
That's true.
So
That's very true. Yeah, that's really
No, I was just waiting for the, what is it? The violin to come out.
Yeah.
That's why.
You didn't bring it?
No, sorry, next time.
Okay.
I'll bring my banjo as well.
Oh, yeah? Any other instruments? You don't play ukulele?
That's my next one.
Yeah,
right.
that's to be a real YouTuber.
Absolutely.
As a ukulele.
The ukulele player. Whoop, whoop.
Right.
Okay.
So I've got here the Internet Citizens workbook, this is the toolkit that we give to youth workers.
We do.
And it sort of explains what the different sessions are. So there are 5 sessions in it. I thought we'd just do a quick overview of them because I know a lot of people listening to this are going to be going, I heard bits and pieces, but what is the toolkit? So
what is the toolkit?
There are 5. So I'm just going to read the headline.
Read it out.
One of you can say what it's about. So the first is 3 sides to every story. That's session 1. Go.
Okay. So, 3 sides to every story. Here we give young people some headlines to understand and unpack and observe and give their opinions on how they see fake news, if they've experienced fake news, what it means to them, why it's important for them to understand what it is, and for them to then we use visual guides for them to see how they can distinguish what fake news is when they encounter it. May it be a headline, may it be a URL, may it be visuals and content. And, these days they can flip visuals and it will look like one of their celebrities is in one place with someone else and then it not be true. And, it's just about them having a discussion about what all this information headlined as news and truth, and for them to be able to say, you know what, this might not be the truth. It may be something completely divisive to the world, to my existence, my community, my identity, and just the way that I go out into the world. So it's one of my favourites. It's one of the first, and it's a very important and topical issue that I think everybody needs to understand. What is fake news? Is that all right for you, Myles?
That was amazing.
All right.
But one of the parts of it I really liked was about bias.
Oh, yes, you've got bias
absolutely.
in there.
Because straight away you think bias is either for, but there's like neutral bias is sort of in the middle. But I remember one question asked by, I think you, it was when I was in a room with you, Fusion, and it was about, can a question be biased?
Yes.
And they thought, oh no, they said that a headline wasn't biased because it was a question.
Absolutely.
And the question you threw back at them is, was it like, why are you always late at school?
Yeah.
And so even if they're not late, the fact that you've posed that question will give, well, why are they being questioned about being late? Surely there's something there. And I thought that was really interesting, because when we think about like consuming news, it's always about, is something factual or not? But there's also the narrative. And there's big debates in the world today about, should news be objective or, you know, subjective? Is it about opinion, or is there such thing as objective news? When we think about BBC and balance, does it then create false balance? And it's this massive quagmire of how we consume the news and that.
I mean, even in that class, I kind of preface that by saying to them, please do one thing, do not think of the colour red. And instantly they're like, hang on a minute. So the instruction tells me not to, but my brain told me to. And the way that language can be used to manipulate and move people around is not to be underestimated. Like I work in journalism, and like the amount of time we spend on writing the headline and the stand first and what the lead story is.
It says a lot when a lot of people that write articles for newspapers often, especially now in the age of social media, always go, oh, by the way, I didn't write that headline. Because people always say, what a terrible headline. And then the journalists themselves go, oh, I didn't choose that. It's the editor. There's a reason why the editor chooses the headline, absolutely. You know, and not the...
I was on the tube on the way down to the station, and there was, whatever the newspaper was, someone else was reading it down the carriage, and there's a picture of Jeremy Corbyn, and he says, I don't think I laid flowers. I'm like, what flowers? What's going on? So it already got me intrigued. Even though I chat with my friend, I'm still intrigued in the story. And it's like, from what I could see, the suggestion is he doesn't recall this, but the picture demonstrates that it happened.
Yes.
So you're juxtaposing someone's memory versus the evidence. It's entirely possible he doesn't remember.
Yeah. There's
loads of things I don't remember. Someone show a picture, go, oh, yeah, that definitely happened. So it's really, really incredible how media is a very subtle tool. And I think through that exercise, young people begin to realise not all that you see is what it seems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. Session 2, emotional manipulation.
Brilliant. I want to start by saying we gamify much of the content, and it's a really interesting journey because we do provide tools to deal with some very dark, hard, complicated and painful issues, but we do it in a way that doesn't lead them down a dark, negative path. So it's a fun experience doing Internet Citizens, but it helps them, equips them for life as well, which is quite cool. But emotional manipulation, I think young people are experts in it because through the workshop, we ask them, when have you experienced emotional manipulation? When have you been emotionally manipulated? When have you done it? And they might emotionally manipulate their parents when it comes to Christmas, about what presents, summertime, which holidays, where they want to go on holiday to. And then experiencing emotional manipulation. We tell them every time you watch comedy, you are expecting to laugh. So you want the narrative, the comedian to elicit that response in you. A lot of them are hung up on horror films, and they become aware through the exercise that a horror film without music is not a horror film. You know, the sounds play a big part. They talk about jump cuts, and they share a lot of their understanding. We then apply that to a very simple exercise where we show them 2 videos, 2 charity videos, and they're 1-minute videos that will transform how they feel from neutral to feeling pity, sadness because there's an advert with a dog and the dog is homeless and the RSPCA are going to save the day. And then we get them to unpack, how did they end up feeling sad? What is it? And we give these emoji faces so they can just hold up a happy face or angry face, and then they can explain that response. We show a second video, which is about Save the Children. And it looks at the whole concept of children suffering in Syria, but it transports that narrative to British soil. And it's mind-blowing for the young people to go, hang on a minute, I wouldn't have known how to care about someone who lives thousands of miles away if it wasn't for a video showing that this is happening on my doorstep.
That's the Don't Panic video of that's the production company with the young girl that's like it's her birthday and it's within a year.
Incredible video, which I think people should definitely have a look at.
Yeah,
for the ability to pack such a punch in short space of time. We then make it into an interactive exercise. They break into smaller groups, and in those groups, they dream up their own advertising campaign. It could be an environmental issue. It could be no uniform in school. And in that, they get a chance to demonstrate their understanding of emotional manipulation. Which things can they put into this advert, which will then convince someone of why they should agree with them. And we show them all of these things happen. They don't always have any link to logic. You know, somebody might have, there might not be a logical argument to giving money to dogs because, I mean, you could look at, say, for instance, like cancer adverts with cancer research and people giving money every single week, every single month, and it's been decades and no cure. Someone might say, hang on a minute, I'm going to stop giving you money until you can explain to me where you're at with this thing. I've been running, I've been fighting, I've been punching cancer. You haven't cured it. Can we stop the emotional manipulation and ask the question, where are we at and are we failing? So logical answers versus emotional answers, it gives them all the tools to figure out how to make important decisions when they're being manipulated.
Sure. Well, the classic example is with footage of starving children on the African continent, and you know, people going same photos every year, and it's so I'm done with this. But what's really interesting about emotional manipulation is it's not an either or between. Something can be emotionally manipulative and true. And I know that, like, if we talk about the Syria video of the young girl, I remember when that went out and people were going, "Oh, it's just propaganda to make us feel sorry for refugees." Right. And it's this idea that, it's been constructed to make you feel, so that it is emotionally manipulative, but by its very nature, that's what the advert is. But that doesn't take away from the fact it is a reality. And I think that's, again, that runs through all of these different things. Human beings don't like to feel that we can be manipulated, and we like to feel that we're totally in control. And so if you find out, if you see something and you're like, this is making me feel a certain way, that admission of I didn't have control of that, you just freeze up and go, I don't want to buy into this. Sure. Even if it's so clearly true, because you're like, I want to be logical, come to it at a logical way, as opposed to be emotionally. But when we have friendships or we have conversations, life is about manipulation. We manipulate the conversation with people we have, and that's just the way it is. But I think when it comes to adverts, you have a 1 minute slot, you've got to make impact. And it goes back to also, you know, time is money. And you have 1 minute to get that point across and engagement and stuff like that. But I do find it interesting that people can't seem to separate that things can be emotionally manipulative and also true.
Yeah, I mean, that's the elephant in the room, isn't it? I mean, I always lift the veil and just say, by the way, I have been emotionally manipulating you throughout the whole of this workshop. And they're like, huh? It's like, yeah, when we came out, we made you laugh at the beginning. Like, that was premeditated. Yeah. You know, we did us versus them. I took one half the hall. Efe took the other half of the hall. We made you not like the other group so we could get the volume levels up. We then unified you. We then told you, you know, these manipulation is how we shape reality. And I think just wanting them to be conscious and the transparency. Yes. So they're aware of how they're manipulated. There was this great story, you probably know it, the Coney one, Get Coney.
2012, yeah.
2012, yeah. I walked into my classroom and it was a day like no other. They're normally messing about on YouTube. They all kind of turn and look at me like, Fusion, we have to do something. I go, do what, huh? Do who, what? Coney, we have to stop Coney. And I was like, they sat me down and gave me a presentation. And now we need to do something. And I was like, this is the most unified you've ever been. But I said to them, have you checked the story? Do you know what this is? And then I took my lunchtime and we broke the whole thing down and they were just absolutely shocked. You know, so the transparency is so crucial. Yeah. So they realize that someone could put a battery in their back and they're off. They wouldn't even know it.
And that's what causes cynicism of our institutions of politics, because we weren't equipped to, let's say, Coney, you just took it on board and we ran with it, and then you find out there was some bits that were fabrications or it wasn't quite as you first thought. My worry about that campaign was it's going to make a lot of young people become cynics.
Absolutely.
Even if they do learn this is the proper way of analysing it. And so actually having critical, promoting critical thought and these tools is actually beneficial for society in the long run, because it actually helps defeat cynicism. Although logic is about, being cynical or being questioning, there is a difference between that and being cynical, because cynicism normally comes out in full fruition when you feel that you've been taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
And so actually the more we understand our systems, the more that we can quash cynicism and instead employ logic and solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, the unifying power for my class, who I've known all term, to be primed and ready for action is the beautiful part of it. The fact that we're manipulated into it out of some madness is the negative part. And I think that's what people struggle to separate. Someone falls in love with somebody and they get their heart broken. They think, forget love. I'm done with this, But it's like, actually, no, you got the painful bit, but the good bit was you experienced something which made you feel whole. And that's the challenge, I think, for young people, to get over the fact they're being manipulated or hoodwinked. And say, hang on a minute, if we take agency here and we actually unify around something we believe is true, we've researched, we can still come in tomorrow and say to Fusion, sorry about yesterday, that made no sense, but we've got this new thing we want to do. And that's the power I think we all need to have.
Yeah.
I just want to add on to that. Also, just harking back to that, with online, it's all about the stories and the narrative that people tell. And also, we also like to create heroes and villains in our stories. And so we've got to make sure that everyone understands or can dissect a narrative and a story, so that it only doesn't just infuse you, but you understand it, and you can then take those stories on, because that's what the world's made up of, stories and narratives, and how we understand that, and also to make sure that we've been shown a certain type of villain. I think that's why Coney blew up so much, because it was the, complete idea and ideology of what a villain looks like, and who the hero and who the one who's going to come and save the day. So we need to start creating different heroes, different villains. And now that we're getting more stories and ideas and narratives out there, I think we are going to change a lot of that cynicism and give an openness and a platform and a floor to understanding how people can emotionally manipulate us, but also to understand it in a very open way. That, for me, it's just really being, I think, direct as well with whatever content is out there. And I think, because I used to work in advertising, I know content is very powerful, and you can change someone's perception in 10 seconds, let alone, the 65 seconds that you have, or 35, or whatever timelines they have. So for me, story's everything. So what kind of story are you telling?
That's it. I mean, the cynicism as well, I remember looking at a lot of research about how there was a lot of Gallup polls in the US of belief in the media was just, trust in the media was just going down year on year, and same with government. And this was it's been a trend for many, many years and decades, but it's kind of it was just accepted of government having low polling figures. Well, not everyone goes out and vote. That's just the way it is. But sooner or later, something is going to replace it.
Yes.
And the lower the trust goes, the easier it is for something potentially fringe is to replace it. And so there's been this complacency in society because we've grown up in a world where you just accept things. Even think about money. You grow up in a world where you have banknotes and you never question what is money, where does it get its value from, and all this sort of stuff. This is the world I grew up in. And I always think about institutions as sort of symbols. And I think this gets to the heart of a lot of problems we have today. When you're a kid, you think a police officer is a symbol of someone who always gets the bad guy. A doctor is someone who always makes someone better who's sick. A politician, you might think, is always someone who runs society. But as you get older, you realise sometimes there are complications in medical procedures. Sometimes the bad guy gets away or does bad stuff and the police don't get them. And sometimes there's corruption in politics. And sort of as you grow up from this world where you see people as symbols of doing a particular role and realise it's more complicated, I think it's what has led to a lot of mass cynicism in the world. And unfortunately, because politics has got so low, and I hear a lot of people in the mainstream media saying, why do people not trust the media anymore? And it's the writing was on the wall long ago. And because there was this kind of acceptance of this is just the way it was, the changes that have been needed to build trust in some ways is coming too late, because if they start doing the right thing now, the gear change is going to be so perceptually sharp that people go, they're not doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it just to save.
But what is
their
the
asses.
right thing? Because it's the right thing for a certain group of people, not for another group of people. So you're kind of stuck in the middle there.
No, absolutely, absolutely. You were talking about us versus them briefly in the exercise, which is the moving to Mars. Yeah. Talk about that.
We like that game.
This game is awesome.
Oh, do you want me? Oh, okay, yeah. All right. So I wasn't sure because we both like this. Well, I think everyone likes this game.
Yeah.
Anyone who's ever played it. A game rooted in the foundation of community and the way you can garner people together very quickly and also separate them in a heartbeat. So we start with saying to our young people and also our trainers that we're going to take them to Mars, and but we can only take a certain amount of them to Mars, and so we split them into 2 separate groups and give them separate skills. Well, we didn't start off giving them skills. We just separated them and just said, we want you to either come up with skills, or you've got some skills here that we want you to explore and describe why you as a group deserve to come to Mars over the other group. And then this is where I think all the kind of magic happens, discussions happen, and getting into very powerful, polarized opposition to the other group on why they deserve to come to Mars. And for me, I don't know, as in Fusion, as we see it, this is where the us versus them comes into play. And we see figures kind of manifest themselves in their groups as leaders, as outspoken ones, as fighters. You hear people who just whispered at the beginning come out with not even just a powerful voice, but a very shouty one, as they then begin to tell you why they deserve to come to Mars over the other group. And we see here why something as small as a game that you think is just a game, then it then manifolds and manifests itself into our real life living. So I don't know if you want to add anything onto that.
I have to, because I completely disagree with you. I mean, the game is not at all how you described it. But that's the power of us versus them. It's literally...
And that's the beauty of this workshop, because you do it as you do, and you can take it on and create it as you want to.
And the facilitators on each team will be egging each other on, because I was asked to be on the leader of one of the teams.
If you do have a facilitator, yes, you do.
Yeah. So I was in one of them and I was on one of the teams and I was dragged into it, even though I knew...
Oh, of course you are.
Even though we were like, we know this is just a game. I was like, actually, no.
Yeah, but it's not a game.
I know, it's
it
not.
becomes
It's not a
so
game,
real.
And at the end, the students always go, but who won?
But who won? Tell us, miss, who won?
And it's like, doesn't matter. That's
Effie.
And they do. Even though you tell them what it was about,
They're
at the end they're like...
ferocious.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what's great is we're completely unified, but then we can completely be on opposite sides.
Absolutely.
Because we've worked through this so many times, but you can make a separation, us versus them, where you cannot bring that class back together again. Like, they're literally, at the end, when we got the assembly, like, yeah, but slightly we won, though, innit? We won. It's like, no,
Well,
that
they'll
was
whisper
like
to you.
45 minutes ago.
Yeah,
that's over.
They do.
Yeah.
They bring it out later in the day.
Yeah.
And,
It's hugely divisive.
It is divisive, but then also the joy of it is that they will go out of their way to show you every single skill and talent that they have in order to, come to Mars with you. So we've seen dancing, singing, people spitting bars, people creating art, doing some kind of poetic word spell on you. I've had this girl who did this drama piece. She was literally the next Othello. For me, it was just, even though, the fundamentals of it is such a serious topic, the enthusiasm and energy and the supreme talent an experience of all the young people around the country from this game has been unparalleled and captured. And so from there, I was quite impressed, but it also shows you what people do when it is for us versus them, and how they could call themselves superior, and then will go out their way to show how superior they are over another race or religion or what class. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you even done it with adults, obviously, at the workshop.
Oh,
and the adults,
they are the worst.
Yeah.
I'll put that out there. Young people, please know, when you teach adult stuff, they are way crazier. Way crazier than
that's
young
the thing.
people.
I was really blown away of, like, they really got into.
They're vicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's great, I mean, one of the fundamentals of the game and why it works is that we separate people who are friends. Like, if I'm your mate, we came together to the session. All of a sudden, you're in team A, I'm in team B. And now I'm using all the things I know about Myles to shut your team down. I know you can't cook.
So
I'm going to say, right, boom, you're not gonna make it to Mars. If Myles is cooking, he gave me food poisoning the other day, so don't let him cook. And I will use anything to win. And I think that's what young people are realizing, when they're caught up in regional issues, where it's a postcode situation, where it's us versus them. You could be fighting somebody who could genuinely be an ally and a good friend, but what the difference is a line about where the postman delivers something. Nothing to do with you. And then you've got people from the other side of the world. There's an assumption, because they're 2,000 miles away, I wouldn't have anything in common. And then you realize you have more in common with them than your neighbor who lives next door to you.
Right.
And we manage the madness. I have to stress that after the chaos, we have a video which we share, which is Prince EA. And his video is really about, no matter how people perceive you, you are one and the same with everyone else. And your body is like the body of a car. Someone's got a black car, green car, blue car, but they're fundamentally vehicles to travel around in. And for a lot of young people, that concept stays with them. And the ability to transcend labeling is the message that comes across really well, man. So it is the hypest and most profound, I think, of the exercises.
Yeah.
Because it just ends in love. I am love. Isn't that nice?
No, it's true. No, and some of the stories, when you start hearing them speak about their own experiences of it, the things that the young people come out with, and I hate saying that because it always sounds very patronising of, like, I was completely surprised. Like, even if you have a high opinion of young people, because young people, by their very nature, haven't been shaped. There's the common thing about how traditional education systems crush out creativity or like your identity. But because young people are very much like just reaching out to the world and just, they're free spirits. And to be in a classroom with free spirits that tell you about their perceptions on things, you always go away with some really interesting thoughts and perspectives that you didn't think, which is so rewarding about it. Session 4, haters gonna hate.
That's evolved. What I love about the workshops are, we start out with one approach, and by the end we've kind of developed it in a different way. So the original version was going using YouTube, actually using videos to get young people to watch those videos, and then we would actually have physical versions of the comments that were made about those videos. So it could have been Drake's Hotline Bling, one video of a ridiculously cute cat being stroked, and then our good friend Dyer, who's a creator for change, showing his happy video, which clocked up millions of views, showing Muslims dancing from all different walks of life to Pharrell's Happy song. Great. But when the young people looked at the comments, they realized that some of the comments were some of the darkest things you could possibly say to somebody. I will burn you in your bed. I would roast you alive, spit roast you alive. Racist and disgusting. And what they realized was there are some people who hide behind the internet and write negative things because they can't be held to account. And also that some of those things they write cross the line and transcend from being horrible to being bracketed as hate speech.
Yes.
So it gives us an opportunity to give them definitions of what hate speech is and what free speech is as well. So that's the kind of the foundation of that particular exercise. When we deliver it in schools, I think because youth centres, young people come of their own volition. With schools, there's much stricter rules. So we couldn't show them some of the things and some of the comments. So we deliver it in a slightly different way as well. Yeah. So one of the things that we still reinforce is just free speech, understanding that you can, in this country, unlike other countries, say what you think about the government, say what you think about certain things, and not anticipate any repercussions. So that's one thing that comes across well. And then that identity of what hate speech is, knowing that it's criticizing or attacking someone because of their disability, physical or mental, their sexual preference, attacking them because of their race or ethnicity, you know, these fundamental areas. And also letting them know that there are other things which, being sexist, wouldn't fall under hate speech, but still realizing that it's a part of society that we need to challenge as well. So
yeah, you're right, and it's looking at things that there is a perceived overlap and differentiating it. And there's a lot of discussions in, especially with recent news about you know, people being deplatformed and that, about, is something really hate speech? Is it right that that's illegal and you should be punished for it? But the way I think about it is teaching people about hate speech as it is defined by the law, and we can have discussions about whether or not the law should be changed. Some people might fear and think, oh, this is just, you know, propagating the notion of hate speech, which so-and-so disagrees with. But I think it has also the opposite effect. If you explain what hate speech is, it means the people that just say, oh, that's hate speech whenever they disagree with someone, you can also take it on, because I think we have to be strong on that front as well, because I see so many people online that just say that's hate speech to people they disagree with. And I think it's like, whether you call someone racist or sexist, you actually do a disservice for people that are real victims of these things, because it's kind of like the boy that cried wolf, that if you just keep throwing around these labels in instances that isn't the case, it's actually detrimental to the cause that you're supposed to be representing, because you're actually devaluing, you know, being a racist is a serious charge, being sexist is a serious charge, being responsible for hate speech is a serious, you know, thing. And so we need to be, go back to the term intellectually honest about these things, because it's not just about knowing these terms so they can be used to shut down speech. It's actually also the flip side. It's so we can open up speech to say, no, this isn't that. This is free speech, and we should discuss these issues.
Yeah, 100%. And also that transition we've gone through from people talking to publishing. I think Twitter was one of the first platforms that people realized if you type it and press send and it's published, you're now under the scrutiny of laws which would apply to journalists. You know, so making young people aware that a bit of banter that you have with your mate might verge on hate speech, but it's only when you publish that and it reaches a wider audience that someone might actually go, hang on a minute, that's beyond the pale.
It's interesting you say that, because a friend of mine tweeted the other day, I remember the days of Twitter where I could literally tweet my friend and go, do you want to go to the pub tonight? And the fact that you can't do that on Twitter anymore, like, just because it is like, Twitter used to be a very quiet social space when it first started. It was just a way of direct messaging people publicly. But it's like, no, now it is a massive publishing platform, in the sense of you are broadcasting yourself to the world, even if you are at messaging or replying to someone, which is just shows you how much it's grown.
Absolutely. And I think what we end with on the last session is saying, right, these are the parameters, these are the concerns, these are the fears, but here's your power. Your power is to be able to block people. If someone's on your platform, you're trying to grow your audience, you know, Nadir says it really well, this is my house.
Right.
And if you come into my house with bad intentions, you know, people in my house will be frightened of you, so I can block you.
Right.
So young people or people who are sensitive can continue being on this platform without seeing, you know, racist or hate speech comments on there. You know, we teach them advice about how to challenge and not make it inflammatory, so it becomes a back and forth situation which drags young people into a horrible debate. You know, there are ways of loving someone back who's hating you.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm sorry you feel that way, but hey, you know, I wish you the best. Our platform's all about championing positivity, and if you want to be part of that, great. If you don't, you have a right not to be part of it.
Yes.
Someone doesn't get that reaction they wanted. You know, we talk about liking and disliking things, and just the powers that they have, and also what YouTube actually do when you report.
Right.
It's just funny because we're there as consumers, and we press flag, but we have no idea the chain of events that follows.
Right.
So letting them know how that works, and also explaining why YouTube doesn't have a policy of policing everything that's put online, Because when you look at it like, mathematically, if everything had to be checked before it was put online, the whole concept of YouTube wouldn't work. You know, it's about a platform for self-publishing.
Right.
If I want to put a video of me, you know, my latest song, and then it comes up 2 years later, you know, it's not any good to me. So it's about teaching, as you said, individuals to have the power to manage and be stakeholders in society.
Yeah.
Which is where we're going.
Absolutely. And the word hate I've always had, I say issues with, because I think people sometimes throw it around so haphazardly. And the sort of the rule I've always had with comments on my videos, and as a middle-class white guy, I know the stuff I get is going to be a lot easier than what people of other backgrounds have to deal with, although sometimes it can be hurtful. But and so this might be a lot easier for me to say, but I still think there is some validity to it, which is if someone throws something really harsh in my direction, but it's written in a way where there is, not to say you agree with, and not to say it doesn't come from a place of bigotry, for example, but there is something of constructive narrative that you can latch onto and challenge, then I think that it should be challenged in at least the first attempt.
If you're brave enough, and a lot of people aren't brave enough to be able to do that,
and that's
or
why
have the language.
Right, and that's why I say this is a lot easier said than done in practice, and I haven't always been able to do it. But for me, it's like if people come forward and they just use labels or bigotry in clearly just to be an effect where there is no root, then I think that is a reason where you could block or something like that.
But we also live in a world where actually some people quite like having haters. I know that sometimes I speak to young people, they're like, oh, miss, I've got so many haters. And it's like it's a cool thing that people hate you. You know, they read quotes sometimes which say, you know what, if people don't hate or don't agree with what you're saying, then, you know, you're not doing it right. So we've also got to remember there's another side of this word hate, because it's also quite sexy for people, you know, if people don't quite like what they're doing or the way they're out in the world. So
it's drama to talk about as well.
And we live in a world of drama. Yeah. You know, everybody, it seems to give a spark to people if they're not gossiping or if there's no drama in their life. So, you know, we've also got to remember that it also fuels a lot of people, and a lot of people in the public eye, you know, they quite like it. They like having that, you know, like you say, they're able to challenge and they have the language in order to be able to do that. So it's you know, we live in a world where hate means so many things to people. Hate means love, because it means you're giving me attention. Right?
No, that's it. And that's always been the point of my piece is if people throw hate your way, it's because they want to let you know they exist. They want acknowledgement. And,
and so that's you know, that's also what I always remember in a lot of the things that I do and the way that people interact with you. You know, love is kind of a sloppy word that people don't actually like to say, and to acknowledge, you know, that's not sometimes not as sexy and not as willingly accepted. So,
and it goes back to, because of in an age of mass information and mass communication, you have to do more and more extreme things to sort of get that attention. Yeah, I know Ricky Gervais got famously in trouble many years ago because he was asked by an interview on a radio show, what is your advice to people that want to be famous? And he said, go out and kill a prostitute.
Oh, wow.
He got a lot of backlash because they were saying, oh, you're saying that's all right. He was like, no, I'm not condoning it at all. My point was, if you want attention, we live in a world where if you do the most extreme, horrible thing ever, that will get attention. And unfortunately, that leads to why some people, there's a lot of talks around school shootings, for example, and how a lot of them do it for that notoriety, you know, getting their voice out there. And again, goes back to the thing I said earlier, explanation is not the same as justification. These are horrible, abhorrent things, but we have created this world where, you know, we can look at Donald Trump and how he speaks in the media, and, you know, being inflammatory purposefully is because it gets a reaction. If someone puts a comment on my video that says something really hurtful to me and I leave it up there, it might get 5 comments responding, you know, going against it. That means I've now got 6 comments, not just one. Yeah. And so that gets me up the ratings and rankings of video. And so even that on a sort of a metric-based way of how platforms work, is it any reason why actually there's a currency to...
That's what I'm talking about.
Hate, and it's quite difficult.
There's a currency for it all. So we need to also remember that.
So the final one, I guess I should deal with the final exercise, which
I think it is your position. It's your take and your time now, right?
It's the 5th one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
running out of numbers. Creators for Change. So this was it was in last year's one as well with Nadir.
Yeah, it was.
So for Creators for Change is kind of tying up all the lessons that the young people have learned throughout the day and saying, now you can be a creator for change. So it's the idea of, if it's making a video, and if they don't want to make a video, it could be having a conversation with someone that they know, or doing a public speech. And it is just, the way the exercise goes is I talk about my YouTube story, having been a YouTuber of 12 years, which never stops being scary when I mention that. And just showing them videos, like my first ever video where I'm very quiet and shy, poor lighting, bad hair. They all mention that, get a haircut. And then saying, what is your advice to me back then? And the responses have always been really good. But then they go back into their classrooms and they can film on camera their own like
videos.
1 minute video of, if you had 60 seconds to tell the world anything, a positive message or a learning, what would it be? And it just, the sort of the momentum throughout the day of dealing with all these issues, and it's not to say no issue that any of the issues are not important, but there's always going to be one that speaks to them, and that will be what shines. And I just remember in one of the schools, one of the questions I had when showing a video I did on mental health, and it's, what are the issues that young people have of today? And some girl in the middle of this hall of 150 kids said self-harm, and talked about how that it's an issue that needs talking about because it's real. And just, it's not that I've been oblivious to it, I've always known, but it was quite a surreal moment of that moment of strength of someone to put their hand up and say, this is an issue that needs talking about. And I think that kind of that fire, that even if it doesn't seem obvious to them at the time, but to be able to put your hand up and say that in a room that big. There was another guy that said, being bullied for trying to do well at school. And
it's a big one.
Yeah. And, it's easier just to mess about to get credit. And so I sort of try to defend him by saying, well, it's interesting because the credit you get from messing around is instantaneous. It's credit in that moment for getting the laughs. But actually the credit you get in the long run is from knuckling down and, getting on with your studies. And I speak from someone who didn't knuckle down at school a lot. Like, I did well in some ways, but I was quite a troublemaker and I regret it. But that was just...
You were a troublemaker, Myles?
Yeah. Do I need to even give some inclination of that? But actually, just the stories they were coming out with, and then the videos they were doing were just absolutely incredible, and realizing how easy it is to do. And again, they live in an age now where, if they're lucky, their phones will have a camera on it. Whereas when I started YouTube, you had to buy a webcam to sit on your laptop. Now all laptops have a webcam coming out of it. But I think that is democratizing the world as a whole, because now when there is something happening on the street, someone gets up their mobile phone and uses it, and that's journalism. That's citizen journalism. We're all journalists in our own ways, and I think that's coming to a much more fundamental aspect of how the world is becoming more democratized, because we don't have to rely on institutions entirely to solve particular things. And so, like, engaging with these young people and saying, you have the power to go out there with your message and speak your truth, I think is really empowering. And it's been just an absolutely incredible few months of being involved. And I can't believe it's only been a few months. Like, we've gone to a lot of different places. And I really appreciated the way that you've both taken me under your arms.
Of course.
Because I remember when I came to the first meeting and it was like, this is what we're doing. And what's your thoughts on your exercise, Myles? And it was like, I just felt all the walls close in and like going, like, I had some ideas, but when I'd heard everything you were doing, it was just like, I've always kind of the thing I mentioned earlier with Jeremy Scahill's advice of, what is your advice to someone who wants to be a journalist? Well, just do it and take yourself seriously. I've always wanted to be an educator, but I haven't seen myself as a teacher. But I realised that this is a way of doing it, and I've kind of always been an educator in my videos. And it's all just about framing and sort of the way that you perceive things. But like working with you both, who, you carry yourselves with, energy, but you're professional about it. People think professional means serious.
No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't mean that.
All.
And you guys clearly show that.
Doesn't mean
but
that.
you do, and again, although it's not about authority, you guys have an authority when you speak to these young people, because you instantly get their trust, you win it over. And authority doesn't have to come from a place of I'm putting down my foot and saying these are the rules. It's more like this is who we are, this is why we're here, and that sort of trust builds that way.
Thanks, Myles.
No, I just wanted to big up. Like, no, it really has. And, you know, there are talks ongoing at the moment of like, you know, where this project goes. I definitely want to be more involved after this year and that. And
there's no turning back, man. It's like getting a tattoo, bruv. Once you join Internet Citizens, you're part of the movement.
Yeah.
And I applaud you as well because, you know, you came into a fully formed team, and you know you're learning all the dynamics, and also there's a legacy. And you did what I thought was the most important thing. Was you were like, this is me, this is my experience. I'm going to bring that. And I think the biggest test was we're at one of the schools, and there's like 100 odd young people there, and we all brought them back into the hall. And you just came out, and then you showed them your earliest video, and it's that ability to be vulnerable and say, hey, listen, you know, you're beginning your journey. I'm going to show you where my journey begins, and we can laugh, but we're going to learn from the laughter. And I think that enabled them to trust you. And it's very rare to have that many young people in a room. Because Efe and I both know we don't keep them in the room for that long. We normally have a quick thing and we're out. You keep them in that room for at least 20 minutes, half an hour, discussing some stuff. And from the floor, they're putting their hands up and raising some important questions. So, yeah, you're doing
a great
job. We want to keep you. I mean,
absolutely.
I don't work for
we
YouTube,
do,
but
yeah,
you know, you got my vote.
We adore you, so yeah.
Well, no, I appreciate that, guys, and this wraps this up really nicely. Like, I had a few like notes of like different topics, and we've, as was the case with the first episode, I did as well because I've been honest on the podcast about it. I like to be honest about it all. I'm learning this. This is a journey for me. Like I've got an idea of how the podcast goes and kind of what the themes are, but we're just going to keep making episodes and see how it goes. But what I like is, although I had some sort of bullet points, we've done it in a bit of a different order, but it's been organic, and I think we've gone on quite an interesting journey for 2 hours, which has gone quite quick, right?
Super quick.
Yeah,
Thank you. This is my first podcast, and I'm
really?
so happy to be with you.
It's been cool.
Is it yours?
I can't. I can say I've done quite a few. Actually.
Oh, he's done a few. I haven't. So what a blessing. What a great first time, and I'm sure you're going to go from greatness to greatness with your podcast.
All right, we can go on for another hour actually at this point.
We could actually. I'm really enjoying
we slightly
it.
had the bladder challenge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how long can we keep going before someone needs to take a toilet break? So we have set the bar at
very
was
high.
2 hours and 20 minutes. So,
Very high. We always
you can
set the
top
bar,
that
though,
right
don't
to us.
we? Yeah, we are the bar setters. I think, I like that. The bar setters.
There you go. Thank you both for coming down, and absolute pleasure working on it. And this doesn't come from a place of I was invited to be on it, so I should say good things. Like going in there and seeing how young people become transformed is just something that when you see it, it takes you away. And so thanks for coming on the quest for global empathy. You two.
Thank you. I
And
love
just
this
want to
quest.
say is the last thing, like this is a collective. What is great is we're trying to change. We want to give people tools to change the world, and the team that enables us to do that is huge.
Massive.
So shouts out to Liza, the guys at ISD, everyone, YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube, massive thank you.
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
a huge collective of people, and we're just kind of at the front delivering a message. But it's
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
And where can people check you guys out? Website plugs?
BMT Stories. That's my new project. So look that up. Although you have to kind of navigate past British military training, big man things, and
Big man things.
Subway's BMT sandwich. Yeah, but somewhere in the midst of that universe, you'll find BMT, which is the ultimate everyday stories of black men. That's my current project. And also I'm on Instagram. You can find me at Itstagram. So it's, IITSTAGRAM. Boom.
Okay, so yes, I like that big man things. I like. Was it big man?
That's a
things?
whole other podcast.
Big woman things. Yeah, I like that. So yes, Efe Ezekiel. So you can find that online. Just Google me, baby. And also got the website You Shine, I Shine, which covers all my youth mentoring work, all the work that I do with young people all over the country. Also tells you a little bit about me and why I do what I do and why I'm passionate about the well-being, care, and transition of young people from their kidulthood to their absolutely amazing adulthood, which I want to be invested in. And And you can also find me on all the social media platforms, from Twitter to Instagram to Facebook and of course 100% YouTube, where I do videos on there to uplift spirits, minds, hearts, and everything in between. And that's you shine, I shine. It's just a you shine and then an I shine. I look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank you, Myles.
Great. Thanks a lot, guys, for bringing your high energy here.
Always.
Cheers.